What's up, everyone? Welcome to the Guilty as Charged podcast. Jamieson is back this week. Happy to have you back, and I also hate to see you. Jamieson, how are you doing?
Doing okay, Tyler. Yeah, didn't when we were joking about it last week, I hoped I wouldn't see this soon, but hopefully we get some more insight this week and some injuries.
Yeah, I told you after the stream, I hope to never see you again. Unfortunately, as is the case for the Chargers most years, an injury happened, and unfortunately, some very notable injuries popped up in the Jacksonville game. So we'll talk about those, and then just some updates on some hamstrings from there. So Jamieson, all you, man, like last time, take it away.
Sounds good. All right, so at least we're playing a team that has a larger injury report than we do this week, but. Just a quick touch on the three players that have no designation for the game. So Herbert, Jackson, and Austin Johnson, and Corey Linsley is also, I think, expected to play. At least according to Staley, he's expected to start. So again, all those injuries were just kind of time related, and they all got a lot of extra rest in. So hopefully they'll all be at a higher level this week. We'll see how. We'll have to pay close attention to the number of snaps that Jackson gets and that Linsley gets. It'll remain to be seen whether they kind of moderate their snap count as they come back. But I mean, I think with the switch up on the offensive line, you kind of need Linsley this week, and JC Jackson, you might have some more flexibility and in order to give him a little bit of a snap count. But again, those injuries are kind of related to overall use, so there could be kind of a ramp up period that we'll see this week. But I expect all four of those people to play. But let's talk to about a couple of players that are not on the injury report this week. So unfortunately, we have our guy Rayshawn here. So he suffered what's called a biceps tendon rupture. And as far as I'm aware, it's a distal rupture. So you actually have three attachment sites for your biceps tendon. You have one that's distal, so farther down your arm. That's you have a single point of attachment. I believe that's where he suffered his rupture. And you actually have 2 points of attachment up in your head with the long and the short head of the biceps. So you have closer to your shoulder. If he had torn one of those ones, there is a kind of a large chance for those players to come back quite soon because you actually have 2 points of attachment. You can maintain some strength. However, when you have the distal rupture, there's only 1 point of attachment to the bicep kind of on your forearm. So and you can kind of see from the image there. He's an offensive lineman, he's an NFL player, he's got big biceps, but you can kind of see it's bunching up quite a bit, higher up his arm, which is what you would expect when you lose that distal attachment. The muscle kind of rebounds and it contracts to kind of protect itself. So unfortunately, it is likely a season-ending injury. Although I did some research, there was a paper that was published actually recently in 2021. That looked at kind of how these players recover. So their average recovery time is about a year to return to play. But that's often probably because they take the season off. Most players can fully recover usually within 4 to 6 months. So it's not completely out of the question that if the Chargers make a deep run this year, that he could be in some type of return to play strength, closer to January or February. But a lot of work needs to get done to get there. And I think in all likelihood, we'll probably see him rest. Some of the positives to take away, though, is that paper also looked at, how good are these players when they come back? Is there any lingering effects? Like, does it affect their career at all? And in large case, that's no. So all those kind of criteria that they looked at were negative. So they found that players were just as likely to have a longevity in their career. It means that their careers were just as long as anybody else, which means that this shouldn't affect him moving forward or shorten his career in any meaningful way. And they also looked at kind of their efficacy or how much they were able to, how good they were when they came back. And that seems to be consistent. So they were able to return to play at nearly 100%. So it shouldn't be a long-term thing that we'll have to worry about. It's just quite unfortunate that it happens. It's not a super common injury, although it's kind of more common in younger individuals, and we don't really know why. So, he's still a young guy itself, and it kind of happens when you lock your arm and then your arm's forced to extend against a flexed bicep. That's a lot of force there. So that's what caused his rupture here. So he's it's an unfortunate injury to see, but I don't expect any long-term sequela kind of moving forward in future seasons. But it's definitely a huge loss for the Chargers at left tackle.
Yeah, massive loss that is paving the way for Jamari Salyer at left tackle, which we wouldn't have guessed, 4 days ago whenever they announced it. So big surprise there. Unfortunate Slater's out for the year. we'll see what it does to the offense overall. But like you said, I'm glad if it's an injury, this is not the worst season-ending injury to get. So I guess that's mildly positive, but
Yeah, we're splitting hairs, but for offensive linemen, ideally you want to stay away from any knee or lower body injuries. That's where they get a lot of their strength. Obviously, the upper body is important too, but this is one that he'll be able to recover from and be able to come back at kind of the Rashawn Slater that we're all used to in
yeah.
future seasons.
What does the recovery look like in terms of so this is surgery? This is like what is the path
Yeah,
here?
it's definitely so. It'll be surgery. Tendons, unfortunately, they don't reattach themselves. So what they'll go ahead and do is, assuming that they do the operation soon, and I think he's already undergone it. They take the end of the tendon and reattach it to the bone. In this case, they'll reattach it to his forearm, his radius and ulna, and basically secure it with a couple little attachments.
Mm-hmm.
And then he'll be kind of in a sling probably for about a month as those tendons kind of reattach to the bone and re-go to the bone. And then after about a month, he'll be able to start using it and mobilizing it and go through a lot of physical therapy and rehab for probably up until about 3 months. And then at about 3 months, the tendons are usually pretty well integrated into the bone, and you can start doing strength training again pretty heavily. And from that point, it'll probably take a couple months for him to get back to some type of full strength or what he's used to in his bicep on that side. But the bicep is not the only muscle that helps kind of bend the arm there. So it's not like he'll be completely without any strength in that arm, but it'll probably be up, about 6 months or so until he's at full strength in his biceps again and ready to, resume full football activities. And then, given the length of the season, that's why it's usually termed a season-ending injury, even if it's not a year-long recovery process like something like an ACL is. But
yeah, no, that's a shame. All right, let's get on to some more good news. I'm just kidding. Joey
yes.
Bosa, talk about this one because the designation has been something between groin and then suddenly it's abdominal. So what was? I mean, you'll probably explain it right now. What happened here?
Yeah, so a little bit unclear exactly where his injury is, but we'll talk a little bit about what's colloquially known as a sports hernia. It's kind of its medical term as athletic pubalgia. But the groin, you had a lot of stuff going on there. There's a lot of muscles that attach to your pelvis. So you have your adductor muscles, which are part of your actual true groin muscles. And those muscles attach to your femur and they really help you move your leg in against your body. So if you do any movements when you're going back and forth, pulling your legs in, that's all that group of muscles there. It's possible that he had a tendon tear here. So one of these tendons that attaches to the pelvis tore. But the other option or the other possibility that sometimes is you get a tear in actually your abdominal muscle. So you have 3 muscles that kind of form your abdominal wall. And it's possible that you could get a tear there as well. And that's also termed a sports hernia or the same thing. So that's why there's different reporting on exactly what he had done. I think Adam Schefter, I believe, reported that he had abdominal surgery. It was initially reported as a groin injury. Regardless, he's feeling the pain in that area. So that's probably why they termed it a groin injury in the game. But where it's important for us is that the recovery is slightly different. So the surgery for both of them will either be to reattach the tendon to bone, similar to Rashawn Slater, if it's an adductor muscle injury. And if it's a rectus or an abdominal muscle injury, it's just resecuring or closing that fascia there again to kind of give him full core strength again. The recovery time's a little bit shorter for that operation. So one paper kind of looked at, the recovery times for the adductor tendon tears versus the abdominal muscle injury. And the abdominal muscle injury had an average return to play of about between 70 to 90 days. So we're looking at maybe a month to 2 months there. And then if you actually had a tendon tear, it was closer to 90 to 100 days. And there's some variation there. This paper wasn't just among NFL players, so it was on your kind of athletes under the age of 40. So it's likely that with the Chargers medical staff at NFL level training and NFL level kind of medical staff, that we would expect a little bit quicker recovery times than what we saw in that paper. So if it is a core muscle injury, which I think is what the most recent reporting was from Schefter and things like that, we could be looking at a return in anywhere from 60 to 90 days, depending on how he heals up. But if it's a true groin injury, it could be a little bit longer. So Unfortunately, I think we probably won't see him back on the field until late November, December. If he progresses well through his rehab, but the surgery was successful and he went to one of the top sports hernia surgeons in the country out in Philadelphia to get this done. So it's likely that he's got the best care possible. So now we got to see how the rehab goes. But it's kind of again an interesting injury that you don't often see, which is kind of unfortunate that two of our top 100 players got knocked out to similar kind of freak injuries, but he's had some groin strains in the past, and it's not a necessarily new issue for him, but it was kind of a tear that needed surgical repair, which is why he was on IR, and we probably won't see him back for probably at least 2 months.
Oh, geez, Joey, the poor guy. I don't think he's ever had the same injury, but it feels like there's just something new, different every single year, either separate times
Yeah.
between, well, multiple concussions in a year. But otherwise, seems like he's just always dealing with something. Just in general, I don't even know if you remember all of his injuries, but what do you really make of his long-term outlook in general? Because he's a guy who's talked about, just with concussions, if he has another severe one, yet he would retire. But do you think this is a player that, so they have an out after next season? Do you think that's kind of where the Chargers might be headed, considering through no fault of his own, there's always something with him during the season?
Yeah, I mean, injuries, it's tough to kind of, and it's tough to kind of predict future ones. And, they do full medicals and their evaluations of players before you sign them. And that's because there are some injuries that are more likely to recur. But as you said, like for Joey, it often is in different areas of his body. He's had ankle issues, he had some knee issues, he's had groin strains in the past, nothing to this level, and the concussions, obviously. So it's tough, I think, for any other player maybe that you would consider, the long-term, risk that you're taking on, but it's really hard to argue with how good Joey is when he's on the field. So, and it's really hard to argue with a replacement for that, or whether we'd be able to find a replacement for that level of production.
Right.
So you have to take that into account as well. So I don't imagine this is also an injury that 93% based off of this paper return to full strength and full return to play within that 90-day period. So it's not like something that's going to be a lingering injury or at risk of re-injury moving forward. It's just kind of a freak injury that happens in the NFL occasionally, and it's just really unfortunate that it's happened to the same player a lot of times.
Yeah, super unfortunate. Oi, well, thank you for explaining all that. We'll see kind of what happens here.
Yeah. And then lastly, I just wanted to touch on Keenan and Donald Parham again. So we saw that the tweet go out on Thursday, I believe, that he left the field with a trainer. Staley kind of talked a little bit about that. He felt a little something in it, so it's a little unclear whether it was a true restrain or maybe it just wasn't feeling confident in it and he shut himself down before. So best case scenario, that's what happened. It just wasn't feeling right for him and he didn't want to push it further, and so he was going to take some more extra time. Worst case scenario, he actually did kind of what happened to Parham was a restrain of the injury. So you actually have a re-tear of the hamstring, a little bit of re-injury of the muscle. And that could be a little bit longer recovery time. However, Staley said in the interview that, he's ready to ramp back up to full participation next week. They're going to try again to get him back. So ideally, we'll see him kind of return to play next week. But the hamstring is kind of, again, a really hard injury to recover from in kind of a short period of time. And you got to be really careful with it because the re-injury rate is up to 30-40% sometimes. So they want to make, they want to take it slow and want to make sure that he's at full strength, that he has no pain when he's working with his hamstrings, either in kind of in a lifting sense. So when he's kind of forcing that muscle, and again, when he's ramping up to full participation on the field. So it's usually that 3-part process. They first kind of let the swelling go down, make sure there's no pain when they're palpating and doing any examinations, and then they slowly get him back into strength training with it. If there's no pain there, they return him to football level activity, so participating in practice, which is where he was on this recovery period. And if he is able to complete that with no pain, then they allow him to play again. So hopefully he's still on that kind of final stage of recovery and he just needs a little bit more time to kind of really let it heal. But we'll kind of see what his participation is in practice next week in terms of bringing him back on the field. But as you and I were talking about right before this, they elevated Michael Bandy to the game day roster. So they'll have a little bit more coverage in the slot. It looks like we'll see how much he plays. But that's could be something that we see again next week if Keenan's not able to get back to full participation.
Yeah, they haven't done anything with Michael Bandy this whole time. Obviously, didn't bring him onto the active roster. Haven't done anything in terms of elevations until today, and that's basically potentially related to Keenan Allen being out. Hopefully, it doesn't mean that they're trying to get Michael Bandy more involved because they expect Keenan to be out much longer. But so I don't want to say optimistic, but you feel that potentially he'd be back next week if things go okay.
Yeah, it doesn't sound like he fully re-injured it like we saw with Parham. Like
Yeah.
Parham was fully participating in activities and obviously sustained an injury. It seems
Mhm.
like Keenan pulled himself out. So it could be that it was more of a discomfort thing. He wasn't confident in it, which is the best possible scenario. That's what you want players to do. If they feel like they're not confident in it, they're more likely to re-injure it than if they're fully confident and there's no pain involved. So I'm optimistic that was the case, but we'll have to see whether we get some more limited practices next week, which is what I would expect, versus any DNPs, which would be a little bit more concerning that there was an actual re-strain of the hamstring muscle.
Yeah, 100%. If he goes 3 limited practices next week, would you expect him to be able to play? Or, I mean, I guess he could, but do you think the team would still be cautious? Like, okay, we could not hit full, therefore we're not going to put you out there.
I think if he gets 3 limited practices next week, which I expect them to give him at least 1 rest day. So if we see 1 DNP and 2 limiteds, don't be too worried about that. That's kind of how they're probably managing this injury. I would expect him to get some snap counts. We talked about last week. Players don't come back to full snap counts usually when they come back from hamstring injury. So he'll be at somewhere between 60 to 70% snap countage. So he'll be on some sort of limit. Obviously players will push to play, but it'll be on Brandon Staley and the medical staff to really, be firm about, where he's feeling. And as long as his confidence is there, I expect them to let him at least try to play and help him manage his total snap counts until he's got a few weeks under his belt at that level. And then we'll kind of be back to the Keenan of old that we're used to seeing.
Yeah, absolutely. All right. That basically rounds out the main part of the injury report. I just want to ask, Justin Herbert now going from limited to full, does that really mean anything, or is that just he's out there, so he's full?
Yeah. I think we got some positive news. Like he was talking again this week about how he feels a lot more confident in it. It's likely that the pain keeps going down. When he spoke after the game, he didn't kind of make public whether he received any type of pain management or injection. Stefania Bell on ESPN did say that he received some type of injection. That's unclear whether that's true or not, but I expect him to, whatever pain management he's doing, whether it was the shot or any other type of stuff, he'll likely continue for at least the next couple weeks. But it was reassuring. I think that he got through that game and he felt good. He's at least confident. He's throwing a little bit more. And he's kind of finding this new normal. So hopefully we'll see kind of a more confident Justin Herbert in the pocket this week, more confident moving and making throws that he might have been a little bit more hesitant to make last week. So I think all good news coming out of last week's loss, even though it was a bad loss, at least for Herbert's injury perspective, it could have been worse. So we'll take that as a small victory.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, they certainly left him out there for 30 more plays than they really should have, probably. But you know what? He was out there and he came out clean. So that's as much as you can ask. If you can hear the air show behind me, I apologize. Not much I can do about F-18s behind me. So that's about it. All right, Jamieson, you changed your Twitter handle for a certain account. Talk to me about that one. Where can Chargers fans find you?
Yeah, you can find me at Chargers Medical online. Thanks for everyone who's followed me over the last couple of weeks. I think my account's kind of blown up. That's a lot. That's Bolt Nation there, kind of following me up. I appreciate that. But yeah, I'll have takes on various injuries there, mostly Chargers focused. Other injuries that might be relevant to us if we're playing a team that has some question marks, like talk about Myles Garrett probably after this week. We'll see how his recovery is doing after that car accident and things like that. So if you want kind of an injury perspective on the upcoming game, yeah, feel free to check me out at Chargers Medical for some content related to that.
Yeah, absolutely. Please, obviously, go follow him over there. He has a personal account as well, but follow him on the Chargers Medical. I love that Chargers Medical was available because that's just so official. And hopefully, you can get a check mark next to that one day because you're working for the Chargers and all that sort of stuff.
Hey, I'll take it. You know, I still got a few years of orthopedics training to go, but you know, that would be a dream job for one day.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, we'll follow your career with great interest. All right, Jamieson, thanks for joining me, man. Take care, guys. Follow him, and best of luck tomorrow. We'll see what happens. Hopefully, I don't have to talk to you too much from here on out.
I hope not.
Right,
Good to see you,
take care.
Tyler. Thank you for having me on.
No problem.